Florida's loss to 2-6 Arkansas last Saturday puts them in a dire situation for the remainder of the 2023 campaign. In the final 3 weeks, Florida has 3 opponents, all ranked within the top 20, as the 5-4 squad look to claim bowl eligibility. But it's a steep, steep mountain for Florida to climb. And first up are the LSU Tigers, a team that has been dominant offensively this season, a team that can really put up points in a hurry, and a team that is reeling after their 3rd loss of the season on Saturday to Alabama. It's a night game in Death Valley. It is arguably the toughest environment in the country to play, and Florida's going in with a lot on the line in that contest. This is the People's Show, CARROLL'S Cadence, dedicated to bringing you in-depth coverage of Florida football, basketball, and recruiting throughout the calendar year. I'm Brandon Carroll, and today we got another preview episode, baby. Yesterday, I was able to kind of give my opportunity to introduce my segment All About Hoops, or my series, I should say, All About Hoops Wednesdays. Make sure to go check that out if you haven't already. I go in-depth into Florida's positives and negatives from Game 1 against Loyola, Maryland. I give a preview for what they could look like against Virginia and what that game could consist of. And I'm going to be doing that really throughout the month of November as we're shifting into this weird time where I'm plugged into both football and basketball. I'm working double duty, and I want to make sure I can bring that to this platform, to YouTube, to Carroll's Cadence. I want my basketball coverage and my football coverage to mesh. You're still going to get my Monday recaps, my Thursday previews and predictions, but All About Hoops Wednesday is going to be a prominent series here in the month of November. So go check that out if you haven't already. Right after this video, get it queued up, baby. Get that thing ready to rock. That way you can stay in tune with Todd Golden's Florida basketball program, because I think they're on the upward trend right now. I think they're ticking up, and I don't want y'all to miss that. If you haven't already, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and make sure to comment down below. Leave any comment you want. Freaking type in pickles and pickles exclamation point if you feel like it. If you want to type something of meaning, give me your score prediction for Saturday, and I will tell you whether I think that's possible or not, whether I think you're being too optimistic, too pessimistic, or right on point, right at the bullseye. But LSU, the Tigers have been nothing short of dominant offensively throughout the season. They have been a top-tier program, a top-tier offense when it comes to scoring, putting up yards, everything. They rank top 10 in all major categories. They're first in total offense. They're third in scoring offense. They're third in passing offense, 8th in rushing offense. And it's just been a consistent effort from that unit all season long. They have some defensive lulls, but the offense has been so dynamic that it's put them in a position to significantly impact the game and win them contests, even though they've lost 3 on the season. Like I said, they're first in total offense. They've racked up nearly 550 yards per game this season, which is just out of this world. Jaden Daniels has been fantastic. He's a Heisman contender for a reason. He's been someone that's been able to get it done through the air and on the ground. He's someone that I think is a massive impact for this team. I'll talk a little bit here in a minute about his status going into Saturday, obviously, kind of dealing with that concussion protocol heading into this contest. But there is still a reason for Florida to prepare for him. They're third in scoring offense with 45.2 points per game this season. They've put it up against the best teams in college football and the weaker opponents. They haven't played down offensively to whoever they're playing, and I think that could mean some bad things for Florida. Florida struggled defensively this season, specifically after Week 5. Once Week 5 came, they played Kentucky. It's been somewhat of a downhill slide for that Gators defense that was it looked much improved to that point in the season, and then that loss to Kentucky was really kind of resulted in that unit to spiral. They're third in passing offense, which if there is a area where Florida is technically better at, it's against the pass on a down-to-down basis. I've said it before, Florida has been a pretty solid passing defense. However, they're susceptible to the big play. They're not going to allow much in front of them. They're not going to allow much to work out in the flats or on crossers, things like that. But if they go deep, there's potential for Florida to get burned. And then they're at 8th rushing offense in the country with 212.2 yards per game. And Jaden Daniels, the quarterback that has got it done on his legs or with his legs and through his arm, leads the team in rushing. He has 684 yards and 6 scores this season from his quarterback position. And he's been just fantastic, like I said earlier. But he's not doing it alone. This team is equipped with so many pieces, a litany of weapons at the skill position, and it's led by Malik Neighbors. He is one of the best wide receivers in college football. He's going to be a first-round draft pick in the 2024 NFL Draft. He is their go-to target. He is their guy that when they needed something to happen, they need to strike gold, they're going to look to Malik Neighbors, and he's joined by Brian Thomas Jr. to make up one of the best receiving duos in the country throughout the 2023 season. They've been uber productive. They're a reason why this offense is the top offense in the country. They're a reason why it's ticked at such a high rate. And then you have a tertiary option in Kyron Lacey, who's really started to come on into his own this season and kind of support this dynamic duo of Neighbors and Thomas. And then you have Mason Taylor at tight end, who everyone knows, if you watch the LSU Alabama game from a year ago, he can get it done. They're going to air it out against the Gators. They're going to spread it around the field. They're going to be this high octane off. The offensive production is historical. It closely mirrors what we saw from that team. Obviously, that 2019 squad is head and shoulders above the pack. But if there's a number 2, I think 2023 LSU offense is that number 2. And I think it's being wasted. I think that they are in a position where if there was just a mediocre defensive effort, LSU would be a top contender in college football. I picked them to be a top contender in college football early in the season. Didn't necessarily see this defense being as bad as it was. Obviously, having Harold Perkins play out of position or playing that linebacker spot, because that's probably where he's going to project at the next level, given he's kind of a tweener, trying to kind of grow into his own in that area. But it's resulted in their struggles defensively, or at least played a role into those struggles defensively. And it's had to be made up for by the Tigers offense. And they've done it for the most part. They have been dynamic offensively. They have been the best offense in college football. And it starts and ends with Jaden Daniels. And I think because of the Gators' decline, because of how steep of a decline the Gators have had defensively since they started out the year to now, the Tigers could very well have their way against the Gators like they did a season ago, where it was just every time they touched the football, they moved the ball downfield and they scored. They had a big play. They were able to just consistently kind of create offensively, and they kind of forced Florida to hit their backs against the wall going into that fourth quarter. Obviously, Anthony Richardson's big run, thought, oh, maybe there's a comeback coming. Weren't able to kind of surmount that comeback, but it was a position where the Tigers just could not be stopped. I think that's something we could see again this year, especially in familiar territory for LSU in Death Valley. They've done it against every opponent they've really played at this point. They've done well offensively against every team that they've seen. And there's not much to suggest that they won't do it against Florida. But I mentioned there's one player who, if you subtract him from this equation, you could take out one of those key wideouts, those key targets, those key skill position players, and I think LSU would still kind of produce very similarly. But if they do stall more than usual, if there is a game where LSU is not going to be the top offense in the country, they're not going to kind of accumulate 550 yards, 45 plus points, it's in this game because of the status of Jaden Daniels being in flux. Because now LSU is in a position where they could not have their star quarterback, their Heisman contending quarterback, their really effective and productive quarterback at their disposal. And instead, they're going to have to look to the third-year backup and Garrett Nussmeier. And I think it is an advantage in itself for the Tigers to have Florida have to figure out which guy it's going to be. You're preparing for two different quarterbacks, and that's always difficult, especially when they're as different as they are in the way that Jaden Daniels and Garrett Nussmeier like to play football. As I mentioned before, Jaden Daniels is able to get it done with his legs. He's able to be a dynamic rusher, and it opens up areas of the pass because he's able to extend plays. He's able to create for himself and his teammates and dish the ball around at a high clip. Garrett Nussmeier, meanwhile, is more of a pocket passer. He's going to drop back in the pocket. And for Florida, that means if Nussmeier's in the game, you're pinning your ears back and getting after the quarterback. You're saying, all right, Princely, get after him. There's not much of a run presence without Jaden Daniels. They've been fine on the ground, but where they're dynamic, where they're explosive is through the air. So you're going to tell your guys, all right, we're getting after the quarterback, pin their ears back, go get him. Jaden Daniels is a different story, though. When you play Jaden Daniels, you have to set the edge. You have to remain in your gap. You have to play very sound and technical football, which Florida has not done this season. So you go out there and you're in a position where you're not necessarily kind of clicking on all cylinders with Jaden Daniels behind center, and he's going to exploit that with his legs. He's going to find those creases, and he's going to get downfield for a 20, 30-yard gain and before anyone's able to really get close to him because they're playing in coverage. The defensive line breaks down, and Jaden Daniels gets a barrera. Garrett Nussmeier has only accounted for he's accounted for 1 yard this season on the ground. He has negative 56 rushing yards in his career, I believe, which obviously in college sacks count as rushing yards, so that plays into that. But that tells you how often he is moving. So with him, Florida's pinning their ears back, and LSU's trying to get the ball out of his hands quickly because they know he's not going to create, or at least that's not what he does best. But having to kind of deal with both of those things, both of those passers, Florida is preparing for two vastly different quarterbacks. They are preparing as if they're playing two games this week because of the contrast in the two styles. And I think it'd be different, just a little different, a little harder if Garrett Nussmeier was the starter and Jaden Daniels was the backup, because you're going to pour most of your game planning into the Heisman contender, into the starter that is significantly impactful. You're going to pour it into the guy that has been the consistent piece all season long. So even though there is some question marks surrounding Jaden Daniels, he is going to be a main focus for Florida this week. And then you're going to have some, all right, what can we do if Garrett Nussmeier steps in? But when you're preparing for a dual threat quarterback, you have to, like I said, you have to be technical. You have to stay in your gaps. You have to remain prominent in being able to set the edge. And against a team like LSU, where there's so many different options, it can be daunting to have to do all that. But it's something that if you're working on it throughout the week, it can be ingrained come Saturday. Florida hasn't necessarily had success in doing so, but is something that's being preached this week in Gainesville. So if you're having that where you're just exhausting all of your resources to making sure that not only are you doing the things you do on a week-to-week basis, but you're playing in a form that doesn't allow a guy that can not just kill you with his arm, but kill you with his feet, then the guy that only can kill you with his arm becomes a little bit easier to fin rather than vice versa. And as a result, I don't necessarily think that if Garrett Nussmeier plays, the Gators are going to have a walk in the park, but I do think that they could potentially put themselves in a position where it's not a blowout victory. It's not, or a blowout loss to LSU. It's not LSU puts up 50 in Death Valley, because it sounds crazy. It's like, oh, they're not putting up 50. That's how this offense has worked all season long. That's how this team has produced all season long. 50 is nothing for LSU. And I think I might be underselling that. But if just in all seriousness, averaging 45.5 points per game is no easy feat. That is not something that happens every day. That is elite in college football. So to be able to do that on a weekly basis when you're playing in the SEC, you're playing teams like Alabama and Ole Miss and some of these teams that are producing at an equally high level as LSU, it gets increasingly difficult to kind of stop that when a team like Florida comes into town. They're not playing down to their opponents, like I said earlier. They are playing at a high level each and every week offensively, and it's resulting in them being able to sport these crazy numbers that are resulting in them being the first-ranked total offense, the third-ranked scoring offense, the third-ranked passing offense, and the eighth-ranked rushing offense in college football. Now, on the other side of the ball, you're going to see Florida try to combat what LSU does. Obviously, Florida isn't built the same as LSU. They don't have the explosiveness to be able to go out there and get in a shootout. They don't. That's not the recipe for success for the Gators. However, if there is a formula for the Gators to kind of just get out and put themselves in a position where they can score points, it's against an LSU team that their defense has been very bad. It's been a rough go for the Tigers defense. And Florida's formula for success offensively, in my opinion, is getting the ball in the hands of the playmakers. And I know that's cliche. I know that's, of course they're going to do that. But I feel like at times there has been a disconnect between Billy Napier in doing so. You see him do it early. You see him establish Trey Wilson early. You see him establish some of his playmakers early, and he lets his foot off the gas. Or he looks in a different direction because he knows they're going to start keying in on him. I think it's important to remain steadfast and remain locked in on getting the ball in the hands of your playmakers, getting the ball in Trey Wilson's hands and letting him cook. Honestly, Trey Wilson, after last week, should be getting the ball 10 to 15 times a game, whether it's through the air, whether it's through pop passes, whether he lines up in the backfield. Any way you can get the ball in Trey Wilson's hands, you do it because he's so dynamic in open space that if he gets the ball in his hands, he could potentially score from anywhere on the field. We haven't seen him have that like big breakout play yet where he, makes a guy miss and gets upfield and breaks a tackle and he's off to the races. But he's been fantastic for Florida this season, and he's really starting to come into his own as the key guy in this Florida offense. And then you also have Trevor Etienne in the backfield, who is another one like him, who's an elusive rusher. He's someone that if he does get the ball in open space or he does get the ball out on the perimeter, he's going to be able to make something happen. He rarely goes down on first contact. He's built kind of, his lower half is very strong. He's able to kind of push through some of those arm tackles, and he's able to create big gains again and again. So I think, honestly, the formula for success offensively against a defense that has been stagnant or sluggish throughout the season at the very best. They've been stagnant at the very best and sluggish for most of the season. You get the ball in the hands of the guys named Trey Wilson, Trevor Etienne, Ricky Pearsall, and get the freak out of the way. You get the freak out of the way. You let those guys cook. That's how you beat a team, or that's how you contend with a team like LSU that is going to be difficult to keep up with from a scoring perspective. You have to be able to take advantage with explosive plays, but you also have to be able to establish the run, which is why getting the ball in the hands of Trevor Etienne and Trey Wilson can be beneficial, because you have Trevor Etienne being the one that can keep the game going, keep the game churning, keep the clock moving. And you have Trey Wilson that, all right, we need to score. Let the youngin cook. Let the youngin get out there and make something happen. It's going to be a daunting task. It's going to be an uphill battle. And I think that I think I said it in a good way at the beginning of the show that there's 3 top 20 opponents left on this schedule. Florida is playing for bowl eligibility. They have to figure something out if they want to go bowling. Arkansas was their best chance, and just like last year, where they had a chance to do it against Vanderbilt or get to that 7-win mark against Vanderbilt and kind of give themselves a little bit of extra boost, they fell. They lost to Florida State, got blown out by Oregon State. Season's on a lull at the end, and then you have to get back into this season. They lose to Utah, and it's like, what's going on in Gainesville? Maybe it's not working. And then they start to climb up again. They beat Tennessee. It's like, oh, Florida's looking good again. They lose to Kentucky. It's like, well, we'll see. And then they get up. Boom. They beat Vanderbilt. Boom. They beat South Carolina. Oh, fall to Georgia, but Georgia's number 1 team in the country. They got this week to be able to get after Arkansas before they get into a daunting 3-game stretch. They didn't get it done against Arkansas. So now they're in this 3-game stretch where it's like Florida has to get something done or this season could be a wash. It's already not where Florida fans expect it to be, but in the process of the rebuild, this season was a 6-6, 7-5 season that they can get, or a potential for a 7-6 season where they can get to a bowl game and win that 7th contest. If they were playing at any point for a 7th contest this season, it wasn't necessarily a success, but it was a step in the direction that Billy Napier is trying to take this program in terms of being able to maintain the number 3 recruiting class in the country, being able to maintain some of the guys on the roster, and being able to sell a vision of, all right, we're in a steady upward trend. We're not be exponentially rising, but we're slowly ticking. We're on a linear path to success. And now there's not a lot of hope that that's going to be possible. And going into LSU this weekend against that offense is daunting for the Florida Gators. And as a result, I know y'all are just probably like, this is tough to listen to. I understand. And like I said, I understand a lot of y'all are apathetic for this game. You're like, just get into basketball, dude. Or can you talk about something else? Can you talk about the recruiting class or next season? I don't blame you, but I can't. I gotta keep trucking along here. I'll be heading down to Baton Rouge probably around the time that this is released. And so, yeah, give me some comments. Give me something to do on the road trip. I'll be sitting in here chatting y'all up if you feel the desire to shoot me a comment on YouTube or a DM on Twitter. But my prediction for this contest, how I view this thing shaking out, is I think it's going to be LSU from start to finish. I think LSU is going to be that sustainable offense, whether they have Jaden Daniels at their disposal or not. And even if they do have Jaden Daniels, I think we still see a 2-quarterback rotation just to kind of give him a time to be acclimated. Potentially, if they're in a position where they need him in the second half, he could kind of emerge and be that main guy. But ultimately, I think LSU's firepower is going to be too much for Florida. I think they do give them some opportunity up until halftime to remain in the contest. I think Florida's able to score a few times early to keep themselves within striking distance. But ultimately, the LSU Tigers offense with Malik Neighbors, with Brian Thomas Jr., with Kyron Lacey, with Mason Taylor are able to get it done in a big way. They're going to beat Florida 41-24 in Death Valley on Saturday night. And Florida's going to drop to 5-5, fighting to not go 5-7 with games against Missouri, who has been a standout in the SEC East right behind Georgia, and Florida State, their in-state rival that is right now a college football playoff contender, not just someone that can get into the playoff, a team that could potentially win the whole dang thing. It might not be pretty in Death Valley on Saturday. It is time for Florida to kind of realize that their season, because they lost to Arkansas, is on its last leg. They have to play with a different energy, a different purpose, and a different passion to be able to take down a team like LSU. I don't think it happens. I think LSU is able to overpower them with their sheer talent and the production that we've seen from that offense throughout the season. So 41-24 LSU in Death Valley. Thank you for watching another episode of Carroll's Cadence. I hope today wasn't too scramble-brained. I know it was a bit different than usual. Didn't necessarily give y'all a too in-depth breakdown of like how the offensive defensive schemes work, but I felt it was important to kind of paint the picture of what LSU has been this season. And it's been an elite offense and an abysmal defense. Elite offense and an abysmal defense for the Tigers. But at the end of the day, when you play a team like Florida that's reeling, you play a team like Florida that has had their struggles, an elite offense can be the difference between LSU winning this game and potentially losing the game against Alabama or Ole Miss, whatever. When you play those top-tier teams, you have to have a good defense. But when you play teams like Florida, it really doesn't matter as long as you can score points. LSU can score points, and I think that's the difference maker. I'll see y'all again on Monday. I will be in Baton Rouge, like I said, on Saturday for this contest. So make sure to follow me on Twitter at @It'sBeCarroll. I learned from Wednesday's episode that it is right here, not right here because it flips it on me, but it's right there. So make sure to go give me a follow on the Bird app or the X. It's X now, whatever. Anyways, I hope everyone has a great rest of their week. I know Friday is coming, so just hang in there. Y'all be all right. Y'all are going to be okay. Friday is on the way. Ooh, I'm rhyming. I'm like a rapper. Anyways, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment down below. Like I said in the intro, pickles, ! Or be out here giving me your score predictions. I'm Brandon Carroll here for Carroll's Cadence, and I am signing off. I will catch y'all on Monday.